Hey guys, it's old Rand here on behalf of Premier Pro Wrestling, and I'm just sitting here drinking espresso and being grateful for the fact that I'm sober and how lucky I am to be here as an alcoholic and drug addict as I reflect upon one of my colleagues from the wrestling industry, Matt Bourne, Doink the Clown. I just saw the Darkside episode, and I didn't pay like major close attention, but I paid attention. And I don't think, as far as Darkside goes, this was that bad, particularly because they had his, go ahead and say some enemies on there talking about him. But Dr. Tom Pritchard and Mick Foley, I'm going to go ahead and say, are on the fence, so they could give an honest opinion of Matthew. The first thing is this: addiction, alcoholism, it's a disease. And Matt fought that disease and never knew about the pain that Matt probably got and carried with him. I guess it's not probably, he carried it with him, that his mother rejected him. The other thing is Dad, who was a worker from a real tough era of the wrestling industry, had full custody and pretty much bred Matt into the industry. In the ring, Matt was unbelievably believable. Yes, he could work rough and stiff. If he didn't like you, he'd beat the shit out of you. But in the same token, when Matt was working quote-unquote light, it was still believable. I thought they would have touched more on his amateur background, and I'm not exactly sure what Matt's amateur background is, but I'll go ahead and post a Wikipedia link in the description, and we'll both see. I want to say, I know Connie Cook, who was Matt's girlfriend at the time of death, and I will say this: there's absolutely no way, shape, or form she had anything to do with Matthew's death. The only thing they could say is that maybe she was neglectful, but you don't get it unless you've been in it and in the trenches, okay? An addict, an alcoholic can be in that state 1,000 times. She got him out of the yard. She got him into the recliner. He was breathing. His color was good, And again, she says she woke up many times throughout the night and heard Matthew snoring, I am positive, because I know from experience, that he probably been that messed up, if not more messed up in the past. And when you do things like call the police or call the EMS, which will bring police, the addict alcoholic gets even more pissed off at you, because and yet it's another thing they've got to deal with, and there could be charges brought even if they were possession charges. Matt was an addict, an alcoholic, and he did not feel that he had a choice. Like you could see in the episode, nobody knew about Matt's enlarged heart, That enlarged heart comes from the things that they talked about. Yes, stress, but that's why Premier Pro Wrestling, or PPW, does what it does as far as training goes. That era, my era, we didn't know anything about nutrition. We didn't know as much as you guys know today about fitness. Steroids were a necessary evil, is what I've heard people that didn't want to do steroids, that did steroids or had to do steroids to maintain their size. A necessary evil. I've heard the same said about attorneys, We didn't know the long-term effects about steroids. You also got to understand the fact that this information was just coming out, That's why today, the way we train guys is we get you in a shape and using muscles that you've never used before. So by the time you do start bumping and wrestling, you're a thoroughbred. You're a real athlete that can't be hurt. And once again, most of that is based upon what you guys know today, this era, about fitness and nutrition. We didn't know about nutrition. You try to eat nutritionally when you're on the road, wrestling 8 times a week, bare minimum, you know. Matt was spawned from the Portland territory. We all know that, Don Owens. When I broke in and first met Matt, I was just starting up at the USWA in Memphis as a green kid. And one of the places I'd planned to go while it was still open was Portland. So I met Matt there, and he was leaving as I was coming, as was Gary Young and Chris and Jay Youngblood. We knew Matt was a legitimate tough guy. In addition to being a tough guy, he also had some wrestling background. So he could tough guy you, or he could tie you in knots. We also knew Matt was somewhat unpredictable, and that was due to the disease. Now, when I broke into the industry and I went to go on the road, one of my biggest fears was being able to maintain my sobriety in that industry with that schedule. I figured it out, and thank God that I took the chance and learned how to maintain my sobriety while on the road performing every night. Some of my friends, and I'm not going to say who because I don't want it to be buried, would say, Matt is a good effing guy. And he always was a good effing guy. I seen him when he was buzzed, but not drunk. But they said, and it was well known, that don't fuck with him when he's drunk, because you don't know what you're going to get. And I knew that. I knew that because the way I was when I used, when I was effed up. And I kept a safe distance. Once it would get to a certain point with Matt, I kept a really safe distance, Then Matt and I and Percival Pringle, Paul Bearer, were down in world class at the end. Matt was still there. And I'm not going to go ahead and say it's where guys went to die or green guys came in to try to do something. They had an opportunity, several opportunities through Jerry Jarrett and his partnership with Kevin and Kerry. And then again, Kevin, Kerry, and Fritz had some opportunities, things they were trying to do. But at the end of the day, we were all kind of there existing, making the same $75 a night if we needed it or not. You can scroll down and see what I talk about. My friend, Percival Pringle or Paul Bearer, and I talk about that. But also Matthew was making that same $75. Nobody made any more than that. And it was really, really heartbreaking, but it was a way to at least stay in the industry and kind of keep tuned up. But it was basically 100% holding pattern to see what was coming down the pike. So Vince first hires Paul Bearer, and then I want to say at least within that year or not very long after a year, that's where Vince got the idea of Doink the Clown, because he'd happened upon Killer Clowns from Outer Space. At the time when that movie came out, it was fucking scary and very upsetting, because of the characters. Yes, it was corny and cheesy. That was its thing, to be a B or C movie, but it had a tremendous cult following, and those clowns were very unsettling at the time, and they really went and exploited this fear people have of clowns, which we didn't know until that movie came out how much that was. But then what they did with the clowns was just, man, it was some eerie shit. I mean, even look at the pictures if you want to go in there and Google search and just click on images, and you'll see. Matt was the perfect guy for that clown gimmick, for that evil clown gimmick, because he was legitimately tough and because he could legitimately wrestle. And he was very unpredictable in his real life, in his, character in the ring. Mostly as a heel, was very unpredictable. You know what I mean? Matt was a guy that they just had to have on their rosters, and that's why he, when the territories were around, he would F up somewhere, as was depicted in the dark side of the ring. But he was so good that they needed a Matt Bourne around, because there weren't that many Matt Bournes around anymore that could carry your mid-card, undercard, and then brush with the main events even, and draw money and be believable, make the people go, now come on, that was real, Great wrestler, terrific storyteller, So Matt comes in and does that Doink the Clown, and it's something that wrestling had never seen before, and what a tremendous idea. This was Vince McMahon's baby, and you can bash Vince all you want, but at the end of the day, picking Matt Bourne, hiring Matt Bourne for that persona, that character, that gimmick, was a brilliant stroke of genius, you know. And Matt, I don't think that people talk a lot of shit about it. Oh, poor Matt had to do the clown gimmick. I don't think that was it at all. I know for a fact that wasn't that it at all, because when Matt was sober, he poured his heart and soul into it, i.e., it wouldn't have got over as much as it did if Matt Bourne hadn't have put his heart and soul into it, and he wouldn't have put his heart and soul into it if he didn't appreciate and embrace the fucking gimmick. Steve Keirn was a good Doink. Apollo, not a good Doink. Mick Foley's always a very nice guy, and he probably didn't want to bury anyone, and I'm not burying Steve Keirn by any stretch of the imagination, but the people definitely knew the difference between Matt Bourne as Doink or anybody else as Doink, okay? Now, at the time, you know, and Vince took this so serious, and this is what pissed me off so much when I was at TNA Wrestling, is how they took Troy Donaway and the video game company at the time, I want to say it was still Midway, or again Midway, they took it too lightly. You know, they didn't roll out the red carpet. They didn't see the value in the video game industry and wrestling. Vince saw that shit. He forecasted that shit. First came NBA Jam. Then came, Mortal Kombat. And then the third one, which they were more jacked about than they were the first two. And I'm talking about the legendary game creators and programmers, Mark Trammell and Sal DeVita. These guys, man, unbelievable groundbreakers. And Vince took this game very seriously. I don't know how it happened, but I was contacted by Ann Ryan. I don't remember what Ann's married name is, and I think she left World Wrestling Entertainment a long time ago. But she was Vince McMahon's right hand, and everybody in wrestling, you know, from my ear, and those who Ann was. Ann kind of helped more than just an assistant with Vince. She was a very sharp woman. She got things done, and she also helped harness Vince's wacky that came with the creative, you know. They were a great team. They accentuated each other, and the company would not have grown like it did if it hadn't have been for Ann Ryan. And I can't remember again. I'm so sorry, guys. Her married name. So they contacted me out of the blue one day, and this was before, you know, video games and wrestling went together. You know, like I said, much like pay-per-view, Vince McMahon foresaw this as being something huge, and was getting ready to put a lot of energy into that strategic partnership with Bally Midway and the big-time creators who were fucking rock stars, Mark Trammell, Sal DeVita, and their crew. These people were just so creative, and the energy that these guys had and the love for what they did was unsurpassed, you know. They didn't quite know how they were going to do it, you know, because they used the players in, for example, NBA Jam, you know, which is what made the video game so friggin' awesome. The work that they put into it then, because you couldn't do what you could do today with computers or art or programs and all that. That shit didn't even exist, man. They kind of made these programs to make the game as they went along. But I was contacted for it. I don't remember how it happened, but somehow they got direct information, and they hit me up to bring somebody with me to go down and be the first one to mess with the crew at Bally Midway to figure out how we were going to get moves in, and then bring in all the licensed and signed WWE talent to get in there. But Sal DeVita and Mark Trammell admitted at the time they came up with the idea in their brains. It wasn't whoever Vince's top guys were. It wasn't who the legends were. They wanted to fuck with Doink the Clown, and they saw that being a really, really strong character, you know, in the video game. If they would have had it their way, they were such Doink fans, you know, that they would have just made it, the Doink arcade game. They really loved it. So I went down there, and here I'm going to read to you what Mark Trammell stated about the video game. Programmer Mark Trammell stated, I worked 16 hours a day, 7 days a week for 6 months to get WWF Wrestlemania out. People play the game all day in my office to give me feedback. Plus, artists are always coming in with new ideas for me and my partner, Sal DeVita. Shortly after the game was released, Midway executive Roger Sharp claimed that Adam Bomb appears in the game. Many years later, developer Sal DeVita confirmed that Adam Bomb was a hidden character, but also stated that the character in the game was not fully complete. Well, they're not lying, man. For me, it was a really odd time, I think the game came out in 95, and this must have been 1993 when we were working on it. I had started a business to keep myself occupied between going on the road. There wasn't anywhere to go anymore at the close of World Class Championship Wrestling, which became global or whatever the hell. And my business was starting to take off, I had gotten married, and I had my first child, They were paying me then $250 a day to go down to the city and work at Bally Midway. And I did it. And those guys worked their asses off. And it's funny because this was the onset to me of the video game lifestyle, which is very closely tied to the internet wrestling fan or internet wrestling community. They didn't eat like we did, man. The snacks and all that stuff, what they would call catering, were not enough to sustain what I was used to, especially for a 16-hour day. And they were 12 to 16-hour days. I would get wiped out and emotionally and mentally tired, not physically tired, because it was a lot of, like I told you, doing something and then effing with it when it was captured. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of sitting around, and that's something Rand just can't do, But my business had just started to take off, and I looked at what I was making doing this versus what my business was doing, and I went ahead and I chose to go with my business, which, then thrived, I ended up at one point owning the largest business-to-business telemarketing fundraising room in the country, raising monies over $3 million a year. I made a lot of money back then. But I handed off the relationship to somebody else and would call and not beg but plead with me to stick with it because Trammell and DeVita liked working with me, and I couldn't justify it at the time. You know what I mean? Who knows where it could have led for me to go and do other things for World Wrestling Federation at the time, But I made a decision. I stuck with the decision. I don't regret the decision. It taught me how to run a business successfully. Now, the first one that came in, and they were so excited once we got all the moves down in a 7-day, 16-hour days, was Matt Bourne, Doink the Clown. They sent him in to do all the things that we invented, they invented, that I go ahead and got to be the figure for it, And it was me, Matt Bourne, and they sent Jack Lanza and Blackjack Lanza in as the agent to help with Matt. And I was very happy to see Matt because it had been a couple years since I had seen him at the Sportatorium. And like I said before, he was a colleague. He was a friend. I kept a safe distance, but he was a friend, I had my boundaries up and knew when to say when and keep Matt a friend instead of somebody that Matt might have lashed out at and not meant to, you know what I mean? And it was good to see him, very happy, and, he was excited as he could be about the game, but he was also extremely tired from, at the time, wrestling every night as the Doink character in the travel, Yes, we had been in the territories, and the driving, would F you up, sometimes up to 3,000 miles a week, but not as much as airplanes and driving, then you get wiped the F out. And, Matt was trying to be on his best behavior, but Matt had that night off before he did the video game, and he kind of treated it like that, And it wasn't like wrestling, where you can show up at noon so you get to sleep in and go to the gym. you had to be there early, and like he says, man, 16-hour fucking day. You know what I mean? So when Matt showed up, it was yuck, 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 yep. I was out all night at the Stay Out Lounge, you know. And I knew Matt was hungover and strung out, and he got through the first half of the day pretty good. Very charismatic, very easy to work with because, you know, of course, Trammell and those guys were big, huge fans of the character and of Matt's portrayal of the character. I mean, huge, you know. And that's what made me realize how over that character was with what was then probably 20 to 35-year-old males. They really loved that gimmick so much that Vince or WWE had to actually turn it babyface. You know what I mean? So we didn't get a lunch, but Matt said F you and took a lunch, you know. And Lonzo was there, and Lonzo's a very good agent, you know, as well as being a great worker. At the time, I would say Lonzo is probably the toughest agent, and that wasn't by accident. They knew they needed somebody, you know, to help control Matt in case things got dark, you know. And what ends up happening is Matt passes out, okay? He finally crashes, you know. He'd been up for 24 hours, and like I told you, he was geeked and probably hungover. And that long day, like I says, with a lot of hurry up and wait, which Matt's lifestyle was not that. The wrestling lifestyle was not that. We weren't built or programmed at the time for hurry up and wait. You know what I'm saying? And Matt was sitting there on the table with his head down, and nobody could get him up and get him moving, you know. And to see the look on Trammell's face and Davita's face, they really got smartened up to what the wrestling industry could be like, and you could tell that it kind of crushed their hopes and dreams because they were such nut swingers for Matt, you know what I mean? But to see the reality of the situation, I'm not going to say Matt was in his zone or being unpredictable or difficult to work with up to that point. He just crashed and crashed hard. So I'd known Lanza, and I know a lot of the same people that knew Lanza, so Lanza held me in a decent regard, and he kind of talked to me again like a colleague, not just some extra jabroni, you know. And he said, I don't know what else to do. I'm going to have to call Vince. I'm going to have to call Vince's office. I'm going to have to call Ryan. You know, I'm like, shit, Jack, don't do that. Let's not get him heat. Let me go in there. Let me fucking try. You know what I mean? And after Lanza, who that was his job, couldn't get a reaction out of him, I went in there, and I knew I was taking a chance because I knew the unpredictability. You know, I had seen Matt effed up between being happy buzzed and then going into the blackout when he was playing a video game in the hotel lobby. He effed up and just turned around and grabbed the nearest person for effing up and threw this person against the wall and actually broke their fucking elbow. So you didn't know what you were going to get, you know. But luckily, I had been in recovery for a while at the time, and also I know what it was like coming from that. I knew what it was like to be like that, you know what I mean? So I kind of walked soft, you know. And then finally, I just said, fuck it, man. I don't want him to get heat. I don't want him to get fired. I grabbed his hand. I put my arm around him. You know, I was rubbing his back, and I said, Matt, for fuck's sake, earlier today you showed me your first pay-per-view paycheck for $7,500. Dude, less than 2 years ago, we were in the Sportatorium making $75 a night. Come on, man. You got to take advantage of this push while you got it. He said, huh? And he looked at me, and I went, oh, fuck. I'm either going to get my teeth knocked out or I'm going to get embraced and loved. And that's what happened. He popped up and said, thank you, brother. You're fucking right. And when that motherfucker realized the reality of the situation, man, he finished that late-ass day strong. We got so much done in record time compared to what we done earlier in the day and what me and Trammell and DeVita and the guys put together the weeks before when we first designed the thing. You know what I mean? It was outstanding. Now, you can go ahead and check out the game. You know, it's really compelling, and you guys today would probably be numb to it, but at the time, it was very groundbreaking, and you've got to give kudos like a motherfucker to Bally, Midway, And personally, Vince McMahon, because I can't imagine, I don't know, and someday I'll probably look it up for whatever reason I might need it for, but the actual revenue that is derived from wrestling video games. If I'm not mistaken, people that aren't even wrestling fans, gamers, love to play the wrestling video games. You know what I mean? You got to give Vince McMahon credit. And again, this whole thing never would have happened, and it was said to me directly by Mark Tamel and Sal DeVita if they hadn't been such fans of Doink the Clown, i.e. Matt Bourne. You know, so that's something that can always be said that is part of Matt's legacy that people just don't think about, you know what I mean? But if it wasn't for Matt Bourne, it would have been at least a lot of years later before wrestling and video games mashed up and became as big as it is today, you know, and as big as it has been ever since. I want to say it was 92, possibly 93 when we were making the game, because the arcade game, the Wrestlemania Arcade game, I believe came out finally. It was done being produced or on the market in 1995, you know. The other thing I want to say is, once again, in that dark side of the ring, where Connie said when she woke up in the morning, she heard Matt's breathing and she saw the foam. She says, and she didn't go into the details of it, she called a friend from Tennessee and held the phone up for them to hear it. We had a lot of friends in the circle. Connie and I were very good friends and have kept in touch off and on for the last 30 some odd years when I was in that Memphis territory. And Connie did so much for a lot of guys in the industry, and she had such a tight-knit crew. In that tight-knit crew, in that circle, off the top of my head, there were 3 legitimate, real nurses, you know. And in my opinion, and also by law, you could see that Connie did nothing wrong. You know, as soon as she got the opinion of a nurse, she dialed 911, you know, and that's just not her way. She actually, after all the shit is said and done, and for all of Matthew's shortcomings, she still kind of worshipped the ground Matthew walked on. And the fact that she went to bed and didn't just sit there and stare at him, you've got to understand, when you're dealing with an alcoholic and addict, that's how they are every fucking night. So she was doing the right thing, you know. She got him in and out of the elements. She kept the neighbors from calling the police on him again, you know. And she propped him up and made sure he was safe, and she had to get some sleep, you know. So you can't fault her for that. And I know that Matt did love his family. And the other thing is that, of course, when someone passes like Matt did, you look for someone to blame. And it's just sad that Connie Cook would take the heat for that, because there's just no way that happened, especially if you know Connie Cook and the way she felt about Matt, you know. If you look at Connie Cook's Facebook and all that, and they had the picture on the dark side of the ring of her and Matt in a professional picture, she's probably the only one in the world that could have got Matthew to go and dress up and do his hair and all that shit for a professional picture. So whatever they felt for each other was mutual. You know what I mean? They'd known each other a long, long time. And again, very hard to have a relationship with a professional wrestler. A real professional wrestler has to travel and work every night like we did, you know. I always have fond memories of Matt. Then the last thing I'll wrap this up with is this. I was contacted, and I'm not going to say by who, but through the family, about getting Matt's body back after he had passed, you know, so he could get buried closer to home. I'd hit up my contacts at World Wrestling Entertainment at the time, and I was trying to, you know, see if they might be open to contributing or donating. And this is, you know, before I knew anything about GoFundMe anyway. They couldn't, you know. They wanted to, but they couldn't. And the reason that they couldn't was because they were assholes, and World Wrestling Entertainment, or WWE, forgot about Matt Bourne and didn't appreciate Matt Bourne and Doink the Clown. It was the fact that they're a publicly traded company. Let's not all forget about what happened with drugs, alcohol, domestic violence when it came to Chris Benoit. And I believe this was only a few years after that. Any company would have been told legally that they couldn't get involved. And when you're that big and your stock is really what drives the company, your stock price, you can't get involved, you know. But I did reach out, and at first I thought, you assholes. But then when you sit back and you look at the situation like an adult and you take your emotions out of it, you get it, you know. But I'll always fondly remember the guy, you know. I think even though we were fucking broke down at World Class at the end, I remember such a positive, happy locker room vibe, and a lot of that had to do with probably two of the oldest veterans out, you know, in the locker room, and that would have been Paul Bearer and Matt Bourne. They kind of set the pace for the attitudes there, you know. We were fucking broke and we were on our last legs, but, you know, they were able to help us all laugh about it, you know. All right, I thought you guys would appreciate this stuff, you know, especially since this dark side of the ring. It was nice for once to see them not totally kill someone's legacy off. I like how they, you know, showcase Matt's family, you know, his specifically his daughter and his wife, and you know, they painted them in a positive light. They didn't make them look stupid whatsoever. They actually gave them an opportunity to go ahead and talk about Matt, you know, outside of the ring, and Matt Bourne wasn't just you know, a crazy clown drug addict abuser, you know what I mean? And I hope that it helped his daughter, who looks like she's really took his death so hard. I can't imagine losing, you know, your father at that age, who a father that actually did love you, you know, and probably gave her an opportunity to do a little healing by letting her go and letting her talk and giving her screen time, you know, on that Dark Side of the Ring episode. I was happy to see them kind of evolve and, you know, not do shock value at such a terrible tragedy. And it is, man, you know, if Matt could have stayed sober, he has so much to offer the industry outside of the ring after being a performer, i.e. with agenting, training, etc. You know what I mean? All right, guys, appreciate your emotional investment. I'm going to go ahead and paste Matt Bourne's Wikipedia in the description, along with the Wrestlemania Arcade game Wikipedia in the description, ways to support Premier Pro Wrestling in the description. Specifically pay attention to our official merchandise shop, Premier Pro Wrestling, on Pro Wrestling Tees.